Hi, I'm Femi, and you're in the stream. Today, NASA's hidden figures.
Lateral, isosceles, tetrahedron.
I've never seen a mind like the one your daughter has. You have to see what she becomes.
Come on! Hey, Catherine! We all gonna end up unemployed riding around in this pile of junk.
You're welcome to walk the 16 miles.
Or sit in the back of the bus.
Kiss me up.
You have identification on them?
We're just on our way to work at NASA, sir.
I had no idea they hired.
There are quite a few women working in the space program.
Not only women, but black women. It was the 1960s. The US Space Agency was racing the Soviet Union to put a man on the moon. And in a segregated wing of the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory, black women were not only breaking race and gender barriers, they were helping reach new heights in human achievement.
In 14 days, astronauts will be here for training. Everything we do can matter to their wives, to their children. I believe it's going to matter to the whole country.
My gals are ready.
There's no protocol for women attending.
There's no protocol for a man circling the Earth either, sir.
We all get there together, we don't get there at all.
Let me ask you, if you were a white male, would you wish to be an engineer?
I wouldn't have to. I'd already be one.
The woman who uncovered this story, Margot Shetterly, joins us from New York. Shetterly is the author of Hidden Figures, The American Dream, and the untold story of the black women mathematicians who helped win the space race. One young woman who was inspired by these human computers is Camille Eddy, a mechanical engineering student at Boise State University in Idaho. Another is Jedediah Eisler, an astrophysicist and host of a monthly web series on women of color in the sciences. She also happens to be the first African-American woman to receive a PhD in astrophysics from Yale University. So, congratulations to all of you ladies. Welcome to the stream. Hampton, Virginia, growing up there, Margot, what was it like? Did you feel special in any way?
No, I didn't. And I think that was the best part about it. It was, middle America.
Yeah.
My parents got up, they went to work every day. My dad happened to work at NASA. A lot of people worked at NASA. I knew some of the ladies that I write about in the book. And, they happen to be very talented, good at their jobs, mathematicians, scientists, engineers, but they were also just normal people. So for me, I got an up-close look at the fact that science could be done by anyone, by normal people, by people that I knew. It was something that was, literally living in my neighborhood.
So I'm looking at a picture here. This is from your website, and it's from the Journal and Guide, Paving the Way for Women Engineers. What is this little clip here from the newspaper? What am I seeing? What am I showing our audience?
Right. So what you're looking at right now is a group of 11 women who in 1943 enrolled in a war training class. So the United States is at war. We are looking to get all hands on deck, all the people who can, the country needed to contribute to the war effort. And those 11 women enrolled in a course called Engineering for Women. And upon graduation from that course, they were qualified to go across town, because they were at Hampton University, it was then called Hampton Institute, and take a seat in an office at the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia, where I grew up. And they then started doing human computing work, the work that was necessary to power, at the time, airplanes, making airplanes safer, faster, more efficient. And eventually, these women went on to work for the space program as professional mathematicians.
Come a little closer here. I'm just going to look here at Jedediah's Instagram page. I did a little bit of online snooping. I'm just going to scoot through the pictures. So here's the first one. Here's the second one. Slightly obsessed, I would dare to say. Jedediah, you already started reading the book.
Yep.
The author is right here.
Yes.
What was the burning question you wanted to ask her about the story?
Well, the burning question is really a burning statement, which is to say thank you, right? Thank you for writing this book. It's such an incredible book. But I guess the first question that I have is, what made you go from knowing these people in your community to wanting to actually write their story?
Yeah, it's funny because as I mentioned, they were just sort of normal people. They were people that worked with my father, that were, people at church, people in my mom's sorority. And it was really my husband. My husband and I were home visiting my parents 6 years ago. And my dad happened to be talking about a couple of the women that he worked with, including Katherine Johnson, and the work that they had done. And my husband was like, wait a minute,
So
heard of this.
Right.
This is remarkable.
Right.
And so it was really a moment for me to look at this community and the women that I grew up with and see them for the extraordinary women and scientists and mathematicians that they were.
Now, there are some women, Margot, that you talk about in Hidden Figures that will be new to everybody. And there'll be some women that if you're in science, if you're in aeronautics, you will know who she is. So, yes. Katherine Johnson is one of them. I'm not going to ask you to talk about her because Twitter already has. Have a look.
120 miles. That's how far Katherine Johnson drove to school just to get a high school diploma. 15. That's how old Katherine Johnson was when she began her freshman year of college. 20. That's how old Katherine Johnson was when she became the first African-American female to attend West Virginia's grad school. 2,000 steps. That's how far the colored bathrooms were from Katherine Johnson's office. 116 miles. That's how far up the first American in space flew because of human computers like Katherine. 26 academic papers, 5 honorary degrees, 4 great-grandchildren, 1 Medal of Freedom. 98. That's how young NASA mathematician Katherine Johnson is today. And she wanted to share a message to the young women of the world. From a young age, she loved math and always wanted to count. Now, it's your turn.
Margot, what was she like? You know her. What is she like?
Yeah, she's somebody that I remember growing up because she worked out at NASA with my dad. But she's someone, that I got to know over the course of this research project, of this book. She is funny, she is charming, she is exuberant, she is charismatic. She has a great memory. If you ask her about the time that she spent working at NASA and the details of the work that she did, particularly on the calculating the trajectories for John Glenn's flight, she remembers, absolutely acutely all of these details. So, she has just a way of charming people. She is just a really exceptional person, and it's been a real privilege getting to know her.
We have some tweets for you, Margot. This one is from Fly Science, and she says, I've been hoping for mainstream media to paint black women in a better light. I'm so happy for this film that represents me. As you were going about your research, trying to put all the stories together, did you have an agenda?
I would say that my agenda was really to represent what I felt was my experience growing up, and which I think that probably a lot of other people had, and which isn't often portrayed in the mainstream media. A lot of times we think of Black history as separate. We think of women's history as separate. And this is capital H American history. This is the space program. It's the Cold War. It's World War II. It's all those great 20th century things. It's patriotism. And it's also Black women, and it's Black female scientists, and it's female scientists. All of these things converge in this story. And they, I think, in many ways represent the community and the city that I grew up in. So for me, it was to both to broaden that big picture image and to expand the discussion, and also to do something very personal, which was to represent my own experience.
Hello, Camille Eddy, mechanical engineer student. Let me show everybody your Twitter page, not to embarrass you, but super excited. My copy of Hidden Figures arrived in Idaho. Let me just scoot down here. As you've been reading the book, do you find anything resonates with your experience right now compared to the ladies of NASA, the Black women of NASA from many years ago?
Sure. absolutely. I've had a chance to go to NASA myself, and I remember getting on the plane. So unlike some of the other ladies in the book where they took the bus to get there, I remember making that trek, getting on that plane and arriving at NASA and being like, wow, I'm finally here at my, what would be my dream job. And it just really resonated that, women of color were working at NASA and doing really important work. And that's something that, I want to do in the future. So my question for you, Margot, is how did you, what kind of artifacts did you find? I know that there were, like you said, newsletters. What other kind of artifacts did you find that really started to tell this story in a tangible way?
Right. Well, yeah, I would say the two of the most helpful sort of archives that I got were, one was the employee newsletter, the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory newsletter, which detailed a lot of the work that they were doing, and also a lot of the personal, after work and, the bowling league and things like that. The Norfolk Journal and Guide, the African American newspaper for that region, was extremely helpful to me. In terms of finding the personal aspects of these women's lives, finding out when they got married and, details of their school life before they went to work there. And then, one of the most just wonderful things for me was to start to find the research reports. So NASA has done an extremely good job at putting online a database of basically all of the research reports that they have ever written. And so I started to search through those, and I would find the names of women, so I found a woman named Doris Cohen, who was from New York. And as far as I can tell, she was the first woman to start publishing research. This was back in 1941, on the cusp of World War II, that Doris Cohen started publishing research. Dorothy Hoover, a Black woman, published research back in 1952. So, I mean, this is sort of like overturning everything that we know about the contributions of these women, women in general, and then more specifically Black women, to aeronautical research and then to space science. It was just amazing to start uncovering not just the names of the women who worked there, but the work that they were doing at the time.
Let me just share with you Rochelle Burke's comment about the story of Hidden Figures and you uncovering that story. Have a listen to this, Margot.
When I was little, all of my scientifically minded heroes were fake. I did not know of any real living people that were doing these extraordinary feats of scientific thinking that looked like me. People of color, women of color. I didn't know any of them. And I didn't know who they were until college. They were hidden from me. And that has got to change. And it's changing thanks to projects like Hidden Figures, this phenomenal book, and a movie that I'm very excited about. While we can get inspired by fictional characters, I think that it's important and, dare I say, better to be able to be inspired by real people of which are tangible and made contributions to our society. So I'm really excited these stories are finally getting told, even if they're coming decades late.
Margot, what took you so long?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that in a way that it took me so long was it was a testament to how normal this was for me and how much, I took it for granted, or like, talking to my sisters were like, well, we thought it was pretty normal. And, it was great in a way that is, it is wonderful because it allowed me to see these women as multifaceted. They didn't have to be a superhero. They didn't have to be the one and only. They didn't have to be, someone whose achievements or whose life was so far removed from the rest of us or the rest of the community that we couldn't see ourselves as doing what they did. They are real people. They're accessible. They are mothers. They are wives. They are, they play bridge. They're just normal people. And so, in a way, it's great, but at the same time, we do need to share those stories, and these are incredible role models. And however long it took, I think it's just wonderful that we're celebrating their work now.
As I was reading the book, there was a story that stood out for me, and that was from the canteen where the black women were actually sitting, and they were called coloured women, using the terminology of the day, and they had to sit on a particular table. And there's a story that goes around that table. I would love you to share that with our audience, Margot. Tell us about that, the message on the table and how that was resolved.
Yep. So at the time the black women came to work at Langley, this was a time of segregation. So even though they were just starting these brand new, very interesting jobs as professional mathematicians, they nonetheless had to abide by the state law, which was that there were segregated workrooms for them, there were segregated bathrooms, and there were segregated cafeterias. On their table in the cafeteria was a sign that said, colored computers, which sort of sounds like, an iMac or something, right, today, but this referred to the black women who were doing this mathematical work. There was a woman whose name was Miriam Mann, and she was in that very first group of black women who came to work at Langley in 1943. And, she saw that sign, and, this was the rule, it was the law, but she just decided, you know what? Not on my table. And she took the sign, she put it in her purse, and she took it home, basically saying, you know what, this is a free space here. So after she did that, it wasn't long before the sign came back, colored computers, they're on the table. You guys are supposed to sit at that table. And so she said, you know what, I'm just going to take the sign, I'm going to put it in my purse, and I take it away. And so that went on for a while until one day the sign did not come back. And that sounds like, kind of a small thing, but in a way it was a tremendous act of courage for Miriam Mann, this black woman in this white workplace in 1940s in the segregated South in Virginia to defy the authorities and say, okay, we're sitting here, but we're not going to have that sign. We just have to have a little bit more space for our dignity here and humanity. And, so I think that a lot of times we think about civil rights and people who are activists as being, in the streets and, with these very public, big displays of defiance. But sometimes it's the small, repeated acts of defiance and, that really lead to change. And I think that was a great example of someone who was extremely courageous and came into that situation and expanded the sort of the space, literally, for people who looked like her.
So, Jedidah and Camille, I want to go to you via this tweet here. This is from Dr. Matthews. And Dr. Matthews says about the challenges of being a woman in science, the perpetuated assumption that minorities are academically inferior contributes to the lack of access to STEM opportunities. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. Jedidah, have you experienced that? Does that resonate?
Absolutely. I think, something that Margot talked about in the book and that we often contend with is this notion of being overlooked and underestimated, right? That for reasons that have very little to do with intellect, we aren't able to do it because of the package we come in.
Can you give us an example? Because Margot, it was a very vivid story about just a single sign.
Yeah, I love that story. I remember reading that in the book, and I remember cheering as I read it. I was like, yes, take it down every day, let's do it. And at the same time, it feels very much like what many people go through now, right? So there was a recent study by Joan C. Williams at UC Hastings that said, that she interviewed like 600 women. 60 of them were women of color, and all 60 of them reported being mistaken for the janitor, even though they were professional women in STEM, right? So
there's a little scene, I don't want to spoil the film for you. There's a little scene where one of the characters, she walks into the room and she's given the trash can, the rubbish bin. It reminded me of a story was when I was a journalist, a very young journalist, and somebody asked me for a drink.
Yes.
Because they thought I was the waitress.
Right. Like it's so in many ways we have come a long way, and in many ways we're still fighting some of the same battles.
Sure. Camille, why does this story resonate for you?
Oh, definitely. The idea of not having opportunities just because of the color of my skin isn't something that sits well, and so that's definitely something that in my current job here as a student at Boise State, I'm looking to keep furthering those opportunities, and Hidden Figures just provides that representation of other women of color who were doing really incredible and important work for NASA. And that representation, I just think really is really important. For me, Mae Jemison was my example and the reason why I wanted to become an engineer. So now to have more examples.
You can't just drop a name on international TV and think, like everybody around our table knows who she is. Camille, give us the one-line introduction as to why she's important. Who is she?
Mae Jemison is the first African-American female for NASA that was an astronaut.
Right.
And that's just amazing, amazing.
Let me tell you about Janelle Monroe. Janelle Monroe plays Mary Jackson in the film Hidden Figures. And Janelle said, well, she explained why this film, why this story, why this book was so incredibly important to her. Have a listen.
When I read it, I cried. I cried because I was emotionally attached to the women, but also I was upset. I was mad that I, as an American, didn't know about these American heroes. How was that omitted from, you know, my science classes? When you talk about NASA, how didn't the women who were directly responsible for doing the math and the equations to get our astronauts into orbit, into space, why were we not celebrating them? Mm-hmm. So I became very passionate. I dropped everything I was doing and I said, I'm focusing on this because the rest of this world has to know about these women.
Margot, I know the book's called Hidden Figures, the movie's called Hidden Figures, but you see this more as unseen history. You were basically walking around your life. The stories were right there under your nose. So how important is it to actually look and find and share stories like Hidden Figures for everybody?
It's extremely important, you know, and I think that, you know, a lot of times, even the Black community, we see Jedidah, we see Camille, we see, you know, we see these women, African-American women, women of color, who are working in these fields, and yet we still don't see them, you know, and we still have the blinder of seeing a scientist as someone who looks like Albert Einstein, when in fact, you know, any of us here, and could be, and in fact are, scientists. So, you know, I think that there are a number of different issues here. One is that we do need to figure out how to get more women of color, more women in general, more people of color, you know, more greater inclusion in STEM fields. But I think we also have to see the women who are doing that work right now. We have to see these women, we have to see them and celebrate them and respect the fact that they can have multiple identities and that there is no dichotomy between being.
So that's just frozen there just for a moment. We're almost out of time for this show, so I'm just going to play you a little moment here from President Obama when he was at Boise University, and Margot was talking about exceptional people, ordinary people, just being scientists. This is what the president had to say about Camille last year. Have a listen.
Camille's done research for NASA. She's gotten real job experience with industry partners. She's the leader of your microgravity team. And by the way, she's a sophomore. So by the time she's done, she might have invented time travel by the time she's done here at Boise.
Okay, so now I am intimidated. Camille Eddy, Jedidah Eisler, thank you very much for being part of our conversation with Margot Shetterly. The book Hidden Figures is out now. The movie comes out in January. I do recommend you take a look at both. I'm going to leave you with a song from Hidden Figures, the soundtrack. Here's I See a Victory, performed by Pharrell Williams and Kim Burrell. Enjoy. Thanks for watching, everybody.
You know the devil can't wait to jump in, to complicate the things you trust in. But I know my foundation is solid, it can take some hating. Friends go beyond the space station.